Hi, and welcome to Creepy Crime Story, where the darkest truths aren't imagined, they're real. At 3:08 a.m. on May 3rd, a young woman's life ended with a single shot to the chest while she slept, visiting friends in a house that wasn't hers. The front door wasn't broken, the neighbors didn't hear a thing, but her credit card was used 20 miles away before sunrise. In towns like Columbia, South Carolina, violence isn't supposed to knock on quiet doors. But that night it did. The house at 1807 Cypress Street was part of a modest neighborhood just off Rosewood Drive in Columbia. Nothing about the single-story rental looked out of place. No shattered windows, no signs of forced entry, no blood trail in the driveway. The early morning light filtered over a quiet suburban street, where the silence would be broken only when one of the residents inside called for help. Logan Federico, 22 years old, had been in Columbia for less than 48 hours. She wasn't a local. Born and raised in Waxhaw, North Carolina, Logan was a part-time bartender, a student at South Piedmont Community College, and had plans to become a teacher. She was in town visiting friends from high school and was staying with them in a short-term rental over the weekend. They'd gone out the night before, returned after midnight, locked up, and went to sleep. Nothing unusual. No arguments, no strange guests, just four young women crashing after a night of reconnecting. At approximately 8:41 a.m. on May 3rd, Columbia police officers were dispatched to the property after one of Logan's friends reported her unresponsive. There was no 911 call recorded from inside the house during the night. The friend told dispatchers she believed Logan was having a medical emergency. The tone was confused, not panicked. Responders arrived within minutes. Logan was found in a bedroom, lying on her right side. Her body showed no obvious signs of trauma at first glance. No blood pooling, no apparent struggle. But when EMS checked for vital signs, they found the exit wound. A single bullet had entered her chest and exited through her back, staining the fitted sheet beneath her. She was already cold to the touch. Columbia Police Department immediately secured the scene. A preliminary sweep showed no signs of forced entry, no broken windows, no damaged locks, nothing that would have signaled a traditional break-in. There were no shell casings recovered in the room, and the bullet had not been located. The front door was locked. The side door, however, showed minor warping near the latch, suggesting it may have been manipulated. No tool marks were obvious, but investigators noted a faint smudge, possibly a glove print, on the doorknob. The back patio was undisturbed. The house alarm had been disabled entirely. The homeowner would later confirm it hadn't been functional in months. One of Logan's friends told detectives she last saw Logan around 2:30 a.m., when they all went to their respective rooms. No one reported hearing gunshots, screams, or anything else out of the ordinary. Each bedroom had a box fan running. None of them woke up. No neighbors reported suspicious activity overnight. One neighbor recalled hearing a car engine early that morning, but couldn't pinpoint the time. Logan's purse was missing from the living room. Her phone was gone. The vehicle she'd arrived in, a blue Honda Civic, was parked outside, untouched. Police canvassed the perimeter for surveillance, but found no outdoor cameras on the rental property or adjacent homes. At 11:17 a.m., just under 3 hours into the scene investigation, Columbia PD received an alert from a financial crime system. Logan Federico's Visa debit card had been used to purchase 2 gift cards and a pair of headphones from a Walmart in Lexington, approximately 21 miles west of Columbia. The transaction time, 5:21 a.m. May 3rd. That's when everything shifted. Investigators now had a confirmed time window. Logan was murdered between 2:30 a.m., when she was last seen alive, and 5:21 a.m., when her stolen card was used. The level of precision gave the forensics unit a tight bracket to work with. But it also raised urgent questions. Who had access to the house? How did they enter? And why was only Logan targeted? Autopsy results would later confirm the shot was fired at close range, between 1 and 3 feet. There were no other injuries, no bruising on her arms or neck, no signs of restraint. Logan had been asleep, or nearly so. She hadn't fought back, she hadn't run, and the weapon had not been left behind. What unsettled investigators most was the method. This wasn't a chaotic scene. There were no overturned objects, no forced confrontation. The act was clean, isolated, deliberate. Logan's parents were notified by early afternoon. Her father, Stephen Federico, immediately drove from North Carolina to Columbia, arriving that night. When asked to describe his daughter, he said she had a gentle drive, the kind of person who made small moments feel important, who wanted to shape young lives. She wanted to be someone's favorite teacher, he said. Now she won't even get a classroom. At this stage in the case, no suspects had been identified. There was no motive, no known enemies. Logan's phone had not been located, and law enforcement quickly requested tower pings from her provider to determine where the device last signaled. Her digital footprint would become crucial. Investigators began tracing every known movement in the hours before her death. Receipts, security logs, GPS timestamps, anything that might explain how someone entered that home, killed Logan Federico, and left without waking a single person or alerting a neighbor. The Lexington Walmart surveillance footage would become the next focal point. The store's internal system stored footage on a rolling 7-day server, and tech teams were already at work extracting the footage from the 5 a.m. window. Police hoped it would show who used Logan's card, and perhaps what else that person had taken with them. But what they found on that footage would raise more questions than it answered. The lead came not from a witness or a neighbor, but from a retail transaction logged in a corporate fraud alert system. At 5:21 a.m. on May 3rd, less than 3 hours after Logan Federico was last seen alive, her debit card was used at a Walmart in Lexington, South Carolina, 21 miles from the house where she was found dead. Columbia PD contacted the Lexington County Sheriff's Office to secure surveillance footage from the store. The request was marked high priority. Within an hour, a digital forensic technician at Walmart's Asset Protection Center began pulling video files from the transaction window. The system timestamped each customer interaction by register, so locating the footage tied to Logan's card was straightforward. The clip ran just over 4 minutes. A male subject approached checkout lane 6. He wore a dark hoodie, baseball cap, and a blue disposable face mask. The cashier later confirmed the man never spoke. He nodded, swiped the card, waited, then left. He purchased $200 prepaid Visa gift cards and a pair of JBL headphones. No cigarettes, no snacks, no large purchases. The cart was otherwise empty. The man's gait was relaxed, not hurried. He avoided eye contact with cameras, but the angle from Register 8's dome lens captured part of his profile when he turned to exit. Investigators paused on frame 02-1457, enlarged the image, and noted a faint mark on the right side of his neck, possibly a tattoo. Facial recognition failed due to partial coverage and poor lighting. The cashier, a college student named Aaron, said she remembered him only because he smelled like gasoline. When pressed, she clarified it wasn't strong, but noticeable. That detail was entered into the report, flagged for cross-reference with any recent vehicle arsons or gas thefts. The receipt from Logan's card was consistent with the internal bank record. Her account was overdrawn by $46.38 after the transaction. Digital forensics tracked the authorization request through 2 IP nodes, one from the store's POS system and a second ping from a cellular device tethered to the same moment. It indicated the subject likely had a mobile hotspot running on their person during the purchase. With a warrant, police requested triangulation data from nearby towers to match that second signal. The process would take up to 72 hours depending on the carrier. Meanwhile, investigators revisited Logan's bank logs. At 3:09 a.m., roughly 1 minute after her estimated time of death, the first access attempt was made on her mobile banking app. The attempt failed due to incorrect credentials. The phone had not been recovered, but now there was evidence it had been used, unlocked at least once, during the 3-hour window between the shooting and the Walmart purchase. That narrowed the timeline. Logan had been killed between 2:30 and 3:08 a.m. Her phone accessed shortly after, and her card physically used 2 hours later. Whoever entered that house didn't just steal, he lingered. He tried to access her accounts. He brought a weapon. He left no fingerprints, no footprints, and no DNA, at least none found so far. Crime scene analysts returned to the Cypress Street house for a secondary sweep. This time they used alternate light source imaging to check for latent transfer on door handles, switches, and flooring. A partial boot impression was recovered near the side entrance. It was incomplete, lacking brand pattern or heel wear indicators, but measured approximately size 10. Investigators believed it was consistent with a male intruder, not enough to identify, but enough to exclude. Inside Logan's bedroom, a microscopic trace of aluminum oxide was found on the floor near the bed frame, material consistent with a fired bullet scraping metal. No projectile had yet been recovered. This suggested the bullet either passed through her and lodged into the wall or furniture, or exited through a gap. Drywall sections were removed for ballistic analysis. The medical examiner's office released a preliminary report. Logan died from a single gunshot wound to the chest, anterior left entry, exiting posterior right. The wound tract indicated a downward angle, suggesting the shooter stood above her, while she was in a reclined or supine position. Manner of death: homicide. Toxicology returned negative. No drugs, no alcohol. There was no indication of sexual assault. Columbia PD began running the Walmart footage against known offenders in the area. With no clean facial ID, the only lead was the gas odor and the gift cards. The first card was used hours later at a Shell station in Saluda County, where someone filled a red gas can and purchased a lighter. No camera footage survived. The station's DVR had been overwritten by the time the lead was discovered. The second gift card remained inactive. These weren't random purchases. They were preparatory. Detectives issued a bulletin to local pawn shops, gas stations, and electronics stores with still images from the Walmart security footage. The hope was that someone recognized the posture, the gait, the mark on the neck. But as of May 4th, no viable tips had been logged. When reviewing the footage again late that evening, Detective Glenn Porter, assigned lead on digital forensics, noted something odd. At timestamp 2:16:31, just before the man exited the frame, he adjusted his waistband with his left hand. A freeze frame showed what appeared to be a hard object clipped inside the hoodie, possibly a holster or a phone. Zoom was inconclusive, but the object's shape and location suggested he was still armed. This changed things. The subject didn't just dispose of the weapon. He walked into a Walmart while carrying it. That suggested confidence or desperation. The theory forming internally among the team was that the intruder entered the house through the side door, found Logan awake or stirring, and made a split-second decision to silence her. The fact that nothing else in the house was ransacked, no other items missing, no drawers rifled through, supported the idea that the target wasn't the house. It was something or someone inside. Still, no motive had emerged. No link between Logan and the suspect had been found. Phone records, social media scans, and messaging logs showed no prior interaction with any flagged individual. Her friends were re-interviewed one at a time to confirm timelines and check for overlooked details. All four women had consistent stories. None had left the house during the night. One of them, identified in court documents as Kay, asked investigators a question no one had been able to answer. Was she the only one he meant to kill? By May 5th, that question remained open. The morning of May 5th, 2025, Columbia PD received the first triangulation results from Logan Federico's missing phone. The warrant had been issued less than 48 hours earlier, requesting tower data from all three major carriers servicing the area. The data was parsed through the department's digital evidence unit and layered onto a forensic map. The movement patterns were immediate, distinct, and damning. At 3:09 a.m., just 1 minute after Logan's estimated time of death, her phone pinged a nearby cell tower along Kilbourne Road. The signal strength, bounce pattern, and handoff delays suggested the device had been moved outside the Cypress Street residence, possibly into a vehicle. By 3:14 a.m., the signal jumped westward along SC 378, a common exit corridor out of Columbia. At 3:24 a.m., it connected with a tower near South Congaree, where it remained static for nearly 12 minutes. Then it resumed movement again, tracking directly toward Lexington. That specific movement gave investigators their first accurate travel window and a projected route. Someone had left the scene with Logan's phone approximately 5 minutes after the time of death, remained stationary briefly in a rural area, and resumed westward travel. Investigators cross-referenced that stall location with a public boat landing near the Congaree River. No security cameras were present, no eyewitnesses were available, but one piece of digital evidence stood out. Logan's Apple ID had attempted to auto-sync with an unsecured home Wi-Fi router near the landing site at 3:29 a.m. The attempt failed due to security settings, but the device's MAC address registered on the router's activity log. That meant her phone had been on and unlocked, either via Face ID or passcode, while in that vicinity. It was proof that the suspect had the phone in hand and was actively using it during the escape window. From there, the route moved straight into Lexington. The next tower ping came at 5:18 a.m., consistent with the Walmart transaction timestamp already established through debit card logs. Digital forensics confirmed that her card and phone traveled together, were used together, and likely remained together at least until 5:22 a.m., when both signals vanished. At that point, the phone went dark. Investigators believed the device was either destroyed or disabled manually, powered off, SIM removed, or factory reset. Attempts to ping the phone afterward yielded nothing. Find My iPhone was rendered useless, but its last location had been captured, and it placed the suspect within a tight 1-mile radius of a wooded residential area in Saluda County. Law enforcement from both counties began canvassing that zone on May 6th. The goal was clear: recover the device or locate physical evidence of its disposal. A team of deputies, aided by cadaver dogs trained in electronics detection, swept the periphery of back roads near Route 23. The search yielded no phone, but did uncover an empty phone box, burned at one corner, inside a trash pile near a hunting camp. The serial number was unreadable, but the model matched Logan's missing iPhone. Investigators were now working with 3 separate data anchors: the device's movement pattern, the bank card transactions tied to real-time surveillance footage, the router handshake log from Congaree Landing. Taken together, they established a clean, unbroken path from the house where Logan was murdered to the store where her card was used and to the location where her phone likely ceased to exist. Forensic analysts overlaid this timeline onto GPS heat maps from license plate readers active along the SC 378 corridor. 3 hits from 3:11 a.m. to 3:26 a.m. flagged a dark-colored Ford sedan traveling west at 43 mph, matching the suspected route. The plate number wasn't visible due to fog and plate glare, but the vehicle type matched what investigators had seen faintly in the background of the Walmart parking lot footage: a small 4-door domestic sedan with a dull finish. At this stage, Logan's family was kept updated but not briefed on forensic specifics. Her father, Logan Federico, had made 2 statements to the press, one thanking investigators and another urging local residents to say something if you've seen anything, even if it doesn't seem important. He was deliberate, composed, but behind the scenes, police noted his growing concern. The suspect had been in the area for hours, unchallenged, with a firearm and stolen property, and no one had noticed. Digital forensic timelines like this one rarely form cleanly. They rely on the suspect making mistakes, but this one didn't seem like a string of errors. It looked procedural, calculated. Movement between cell towers, brief holds, clean wipes, no random stops, no social media usage, no personal calls. As Detective Porter noted in his field report, the data aligned too cleanly. Sometimes that was the problem. Still, the gaps were closing. Investigators now had an approximate route, a 2-hour window of activity, the most likely disposal zone for Logan's phone, and the behavioral pattern of someone who avoided random movement. The case was no longer about who, it was about where he'd go next. And on May 7th, Columbia PD would get their first answer to that question. A fire 1 county over would send this investigation into its next phase. At 6:46 a.m. on May 7th, 2020, fire crews from the Gaston Fire Department responded to reports of smoke rising from a residential structure near Green Hill Road, roughly 23 miles from Columbia. By the time they arrived, the front porch had already collapsed inward, and flames were advancing through the living room ceiling. The blaze was contained by 7:12 a.m., but significant internal damage had been done. What initially appeared to be a vacant house fire quickly turned into a law enforcement priority when responders located clear evidence of arson. The fire had started in 3 separate ignition points: kitchen stove, hallway linen closet, and a small pile of clothing doused in accelerant near the back bedroom. This was not accidental. The intent was destruction. Inside the home, investigators found a gas can partially melted near the point of origin. The remains of burned bedding, electronics, and household trash were scattered throughout the interior. There were no bodies. but the fire scene unit recovered a charred Apple iPhone back casing near the stove. A forensic electronics technician collected the remnants and submitted them for board-level analysis. Based on its dimensions and button configuration, the device was consistent with the same model missing from Logan Federico's murder scene. The address itself, 1156 Green Hill, was not registered to the suspect. It belonged to a distant acquaintance of a former cellmate, now incarcerated. The house had been unoccupied for several weeks. No utilities had been in use. Entry appeared forced through the side window using a pry bar. The suspect had no known connection to the homeowner or local residents, further indicating a temporary hideout or dump location. The structure was likely used as a brief stopover, then intentionally torched to erase evidence. The investigation escalated from Columbia to Lexington County. Ballistics teams began cross-checking metal debris collected from the fire against trace fragments found in Logan's bedroom wall. Among them was a distorted copper jacket fragment recovered inside the hallway closet at Green Hill. Initial comparison testing confirmed a match in rifling characteristics with a .40 caliber round. What drew greater attention was the discovery of a thermal damage receipt buried under part of the living room carpet, partially protected from the flames. It was crumpled, printed from a convenience store terminal, time-stamped at 3:52 a.m. on May 3rd, just 40 minutes after Logan was believed to have been killed. The receipt listed a $20 prepaid phone top-up and a pack of gum. The store ID number was traced back to a location on Garner's Ferry Road, southeast of Columbia. Surveillance footage from that store showed a male subject in a dark hoodie entering the location, paying in cash and exiting within 2 minutes. No clear face was visible, but the left hand displayed a mark near the wrist, possibly a tattoo or scar. This matched the partial mark observed in the Walmart footage from Chapter 2. The movement was cautious, controlled. The suspect never lingered, never looked at cameras. The pattern was taking shape. The subject moved in straight lines. Crime scene, exit route, cleanup point, leaving minimal trace each time. No forensic outbursts, no personal touches. The decision to set fire to the Green Hill residence was not impulsive. It followed the same procedural tone as the phone wipe, the card usage, and the route evasion. From a behavioral standpoint, the pattern fell within the parameters of a high-functioning, low-empathy offender, organized, mobile, operating with short-term staging locations. No ongoing social footprint. Forensics flagged this as a Level 3 risk offender under SCIC protocols, posing continued threat if not located quickly. The search radius was redefined. Officers canvassed surrounding properties, abandoned outbuildings and nearby gas stations. Patrol units interviewed residents along Green Hill and Saxgo Road. One local, a farmer who lived half a mile from the burned property, reported seeing a man walking south around 4 a.m. on May 5th. He said the man looked out of place, wearing 2 jackets and carrying a large trash bag. He assumed it was someone moving out. That tip was logged but not corroborated. Investigators submitted all recovered evidence from the fire scene for latent print testing, including the gas can and receipt. Preliminary reports showed no viable ridge detail, consistent with gloved handling. The only partial fingerprint recovered came from the inner flap of the receipt, insufficient for identification, but useful for exclusion purposes later. Meanwhile, Logan's family held a private memorial in Waxhaw. Her father declined press interviews but issued a statement through the sheriff's department. "We're not seeking revenge, we're seeking resolution." On May 8th, the lab returned a positive result from the ballistics test. The copper jacket fragment recovered from Green Hill matched metal traces found in drywall extracted from Logan's bedroom. That placed the murder weapon inside both locations. Undeniable linkage through physical evidence. Investigators now had 3 critical crime scenes connected by timeline, travel, and forensics. Cypress Street, homicide. Lexington Walmart, card use. Green Hill residence. Weapon disposal and arson. With these anchors in place, Columbia PD prepared a probable cause affidavit for a regional search and surveillance operation. The name of a suspect had not yet been released publicly. No charges had been filed, but the manhunt was now operational. By the morning of May 9th, 2025, investigators had connected 3 locations by forensic evidence: the house where Logan Federico was killed, the Walmart in Lexington where her debit card was used, and the burned-out structure on Green Hill Road. Each site added a piece to the timeline, but there was still no name. That changed when a latent print examiner revisited a previously cleared surface, the inside hinge of the Cypress Street side door. The first sweep, done under high-pressure conditions, had produced smudged partials, but a reprocessing under vacuum dye stain revealed a friction ridge pattern not captured in the initial pass. It wasn't complete, but it was viable. That partial print matched an individual in the South Carolina criminal database, a male age 30, with a record including burglary, weapons possession, and probation violations. His name had never come up in connection to Logan before. No messages, no mutual contacts, no social media overlap. This wasn't someone she knew. The link was physical. It placed him at the point of entry, and it raised the question, why was this detail missed earlier? The answer was procedural. The initial print was assumed to belong to the homeowner or one of Logan's friends, both of whom had access through the side door. The surface hadn't been prioritized because there was no forced entry. But in homicides, the absence of damage doesn't mean absence of entry. Forensic protocol was adjusted after the fact, but the missed opportunity, though recovered, added urgency. With the fingerprint tied directly to the break-in point, law enforcement secured an arrest warrant. But he was already gone. Detectives returned to the footage at the Garner's Ferry convenience store. A freeze-frame enhancement of the suspect's wrist revealed what now clearly resembled a faded tattoo, block lettering, likely a nickname. Cross-referencing prior booking photos confirmed it. Same person, same mark, same hand. At this point, the suspect's name was redacted from public documents pending indictment, but internally he was now the focus of an active fugitive operation. He had disappeared from his last known residence 4 days prior. His phone, if he still had one, was not pinging. He had no registered vehicle, no known employment. He had slipped into the cracks he knew best, a detail that gave investigators pause. In his last arrest, he had listed an address near Saluda County, a trailer behind an abandoned auto parts lot. Deputies were sent there, with body cams rolling. The property was empty, but in the overgrown grass outside the back trailer wall, they found a pair of rubber gloves partially buried in the mud. Inside one glove was a used match. The match head had traces of an accelerant consistent with the type used in the Green Hill fire. Lab results would later confirm it had been handled by the same individual who left the Cypress Street print. The gloves closed the gap between burglary, arson, and homicide. At this point in the investigation, the evidence spoke clearly, even if the suspect didn't. This wasn't a break-in gone wrong. It was controlled movement, planned disposal, and strategic silence. It's worth saying plainly. Logan was never supposed to be part of anything dangerous. She was visiting friends, sleeping in a borrowed room, when someone outside her world made a decision she would never wake from. That's not a twist. That's the core of the crime. By May 10, 2025, law enforcement had a name, a fingerprint, a ballistic match, and an active warrant. But the suspect was gone. Fugitive units from Richland and Lexington counties shifted into real-time tracking, with U.S. Marshals notified under the Violent Offender Task Force Directive. The case had officially moved beyond reactive investigation. At this point, the focus was not just on locating the suspect, but understanding how he'd stayed ahead of the system. The most recent sighting came from a truck stop near Aiken County, 97 miles southwest of Columbia. Surveillance footage from the fuel island showed a man resembling the suspect walking beside a refrigerated semi-trailer around 1:22 a.m. on May 10th. He was wearing work gloves and a reflective vest, not out of place among long-haul drivers. But the man didn't purchase fuel. He loitered near an unattended rig, checked door handles, and disappeared into the tree line when a clerk stepped outside. No fingerprints were recovered from the truck, but the lead was enough to justify rerouting regional patrols. Authorities suspected the fugitive was moving by hitching rides or sleeping in abandoned vehicles. He avoided phones, no ATM withdrawals, no new transactions under his name. He knew which systems triggered alerts, and he stayed under them. That level of control pointed to something more than instinct. It pointed to repetition. Detectives reviewed his criminal history again. He'd served time for second-degree burglary, auto theft, and probation violation, with prior charges dropped due to procedural errors. One previous arrest mentioned his use of unoccupied seasonal homes as temporary crash sites. He traveled light and kept a low profile. No close relatives, no permanent address, no bank accounts. A behavioral analyst assigned to the task force wrote, "He is not surviving by accident. He is executing a routine." As the dragnet expanded, investigators returned to Colombia for a final, high-resolution sweep of the Cypress Street crime scene using portable 3D scan technology. While scanning baseboards and furniture alignment, technicians discovered a small abrasion behind the headboard in Logan's room, barely visible to the naked eye. Inside the wall cavity, lodged within insulation, was the projectile, the bullet. It had passed through Logan's body, skimmed the mattress frame, and embedded itself at a downward angle consistent with the ME's findings. The round was a .40 caliber full metal jacket, same class as the casing fragment recovered from the Green Hill fire scene. Ballistic rifling confirmed a full match. Same weapon, same shooter. It was the final physical link. By May 11th, flyers with the suspect's face, extracted from enhanced stills, were distributed to bus depots, shelters, and state lines. The message was clear: do not approach. Notify local law enforcement immediately. That evening, a tip came in from a security guard in Augusta, Georgia, just across the state line. He reported seeing a man sleeping inside an abandoned rail car. The description was vague, but the time frame matched. Deputies arrived less than 30 minutes later. The rail car was empty, but inside they found an empty bottle of water, a fast food wrapper dated May 9th, and one item that mattered more than anything else: a phone battery. It matched the same model as Logan's missing phone. Even separated from the device itself, the battery retained a partial serial number, traceable back to the original carrier order tied to her account. The suspect had stripped it, likely in an attempt to destroy tracking capability, then abandoned it when the phone itself was no longer useful. This was the pattern repeating: take only what's necessary, dispose of what isn't, and leave nothing that points back. But every pattern has limits. Law enforcement now had not only a suspect, they had a method. That method, no matter how calculated, had a margin of error. And that's what they were working to expose. No one, no matter how careful, stays in motion forever. By May 13th, 2025, after 10 days of coordinated pursuit across county lines, state task forces had narrowed the fugitive's likely location to a strip of abandoned service buildings near Graniteville, South Carolina. It wasn't a high-traffic zone. The structures, remnants of a defunct textile hub, had been shuttered since the late 1990s. But surveillance drones had flagged movement, a figure appearing briefly on thermal imaging around 2:38 a.m., moving between two metal storage units. What confirmed interest wasn't the heat signature. It was the pattern. This figure moved the same way, slow, deliberate, using natural shadows. No flashlight, no phone light. A rhythm that matched prior sightings from the truck stop in the Augusta rail yard. Law enforcement held the perimeter. A U.S. Marshals fugitive apprehension team was briefed with the ballistic link, fingerprint confirmation, and the evolving behavior profile. He was likely unarmed at this point, but still considered dangerous due to his documented pattern of forced entry and evidence destruction. At 4:06 a.m., a ground team moved in. The first point of contact occurred behind Unit 14, a structure partially collapsed at the rear. The suspect was located inside, lying on a mattress constructed from cardboard and fiberglass insulation. He did not resist. No weapon was found on his person. He was wearing 3 layers of clothing, 2 pairs of socks, and carried a black plastic bag containing half a loaf of bread, an empty water bottle, and a Ziploc pouch with expired bus fare tickets. His name was confirmed through fingerprints on scene. He was transported without incident. It was over. At the processing center, he initially refused to answer any questions. Attorneys were contacted and a public defender assigned. Interview protocols were followed precisely. No confession was obtained. But the case no longer relied on admission. A chain of physical evidence had been established across 4 crime scenes. His fingerprint on the Cypress Street side door, the debit card usage at Walmart, the arson-linked bullet fragment recovered from the Green Hill fire, the gloves and stripped phone battery near the rail yard, and now his presence, captured, contained, and booked. The charge sheet was formalized within 12 hours. First-degree murder, first-degree burglary, possession of a weapon during a violent crime, arson, tampering with physical evidence, financial identity fraud. Each charge was supported by forensic documentation, including timestamp surveillance, ballistic testing, fingerprint comparisons, and trace residue analysis. Prosecutors announced their intent to seek life without parole. Outside the department, Logan's family was notified personally before any public statement. Her father requested privacy, offering only one line to the media. She didn't get a choice. He did. And that's what makes this justice. There were no televised perp walks, no press conference theatrics, just an official booking photo, a closed cell door, and a paper trail tying one man to a path of destruction that began in a quiet bedroom and ended in a heat signature under broken metal. The aftermath shifted to trial preparation. Analysts were assigned to organize forensic exhibits. Officers were debriefed and reports finalized. But in many ways, the most difficult work was already done. Capturing a suspect is only part of the process. Explaining what happened and why requires something else. On March 6, 2025, exactly 7 weeks after Logan Crosby's remains were recovered from a remote fire pit in Wilkinson County, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation submitted its final evidence package to the Baldwin County District Attorney's Office. The material was extensive, over 300 pages of forensic analysis, cell phone location data, search warrant returns, and one recorded interview that changed the course of the case. Alexander Dickey was formally indicted for felony murder, malice murder, tampering with evidence, and concealing the death of another. No bond was offered. He was immediately transferred from Wilkinson County Jail to Baldwin County Detention Center under a 24-hour surveillance protocol. The case had reached a critical inflection point. Up until that moment, Dickey had only been held on charges related to concealment. But once the GBI verified the burned skeletal remains, as Logan's through DNA extracted from a molar fragment and cross-matched it with dental records provided by his family dentist, the prosecution had what it needed: physical evidence of death, a known suspect with a digital footprint leading to the disposal site, and motive still under investigation. The indictment cited a confluence of circumstantial and direct evidence. Among them, GPS metadata placing Dickey near the fire site on January 18, 2025, hours after Logan was last seen alive. Surveillance from a nearby Walmart showed Dickey purchasing gloves, lighter fluid, and a collapsible shovel. And while no murder weapon was ever recovered, the condition of the remains suggested post-mortem incineration consistent with high-intensity accelerant burns. Likely gasoline. Medical examiners could not determine an exact cause of death. The condition of the remains ruled out gunshot wounds or sharp force trauma. No bones bore fracture, markings consistent with blunt force. However, investigators noted a complete absence of cranial fragments, raising questions about whether the skull had been deliberately destroyed or removed. Investigators also traced digital communications between Dickey and an unnamed acquaintance, now considered a material witness, in which he allegedly made statements referencing cleaning up a mess and can't risk him talking. While not a direct confession, the court considered these communications indicative of consciousness of guilt. In the preliminary hearing, the prosecution chose not to outline the full narrative. Instead, they focused on chain of custody, admissibility of the Walmart surveillance video, and the forensic pathologist's conclusions. The defense attempted to suppress the digital evidence, arguing unlawful seizure, but the warrant returns were clean, with timestamps and judge signatures properly logged. Meanwhile, Logan's family released a statement through their attorney. "We will never see our son again, but we pray this legal process delivers some measure of truth. We ask for space as we continue to grieve a loss that should never have happened." The public response was swift and polarized. Social media circulated Logan's final text, never made public in full by authorities, but paraphrased in court as "something's wrong, he's back." Comment threads filled with speculation, accusations, and frustration over how someone previously incarcerated for domestic assault could have been released without thorough follow-up. By May 2025, the Logan Crosby Foundation for Victim Advocacy had been launched, focused on post-prison monitoring gaps and domestic abuse warning signs in non-marital relationships, an area frequently neglected by formal systems. The foundation, led by Logan's mother and two of his cousins, began working with state legislators to draft what would later be referred to as Logan's Bill, proposing mandatory digital check-ins for recent parolees with prior violent offenses. The trial date was initially set for September 2025, but is now postponed to 2026 due to evidentiary backlogs. Dickey remains in custody. He has not entered a plea. As of today, July 1st, 2025, Logan's remains have been fully released to his family. A private memorial was held last week in Gray, Georgia. No media were allowed. The only public artifact was a photo shared by his brother, a black and white image of Logan as a child, fishing beside their father. No caption, just a date. What happened to Logan Crosby was not just a tragedy, it was preventable. The systems in place to monitor high-risk offenders failed, and in that failure, a young man with his life ahead of him disappeared into smoke and ash. His body was discarded like debris, but the evidence remained. Not all crimes leave behind a bullet or a scream. Some leave patterns, missing time, hidden text messages, surveillance footage no one thought to check, until it's too late. Logan's case reminds us, closure isn't a courtroom verdict. It's the ability to walk away with clarity, however painful. His story ends here, but the questions he leaves behind demand answers far beyond a single arrest. What happened to Logan reminds me, some endings come not with answers, but with warnings. If you've made it this far, maybe it's because, like me, you've lost someone, or almost did. Maybe you've seen the signs and stayed silent, or maybe you spoke up and were ignored. Let this story be a reminder. Silence doesn't keep us safe. Awareness does. We owe it to ourselves and to others to notice, to ask, and to act. Now I want to hear from you. What stood out to you in Logan's story? Have you ever felt something was wrong but didn't know what to do? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Whether you're watching from Georgia or anywhere else, your voice matters. If this video moved you or made you think differently, leave a comment, share where you're from, or tell me why it resonated or didn't. And if you want to follow more true stories that matter, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I'll be here bringing you the truth, one case at a time.